First, let me introduce myself. My name is Bailey Parker. I'm the Communications Director here at the Department of Consumer Affairs. I've been here for about 4 years now. Today, we're going to be specifically talking about our complaint process. When I travel around the state, I always ask the first question of how many of you have actually heard of SCDCA? And I'll get, I don't know, maybe like a third of hands up. And usually people, when they have heard of us, know us for our complaint process or being able to file a complaint against a business. So we're going to be going through what that process looks like today. So what complaints we take, what we don't take, how to file a complaint, things like that. First, I got to give you the disclaimer, as I always do. I'm not an attorney. You don't want legal advice from me. It'd be really bad advice if I were to give it. This presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading various laws discussed. We're going to talk just briefly about the Consumer Protection Code, or it's mentioned. So this presentation isn't meant to serve as a substitution of getting to know that yourself or having an attorney go over that with you. This presentation is meant to serve as an introduction and overview to the topic. All right, so here is the complaint overview for 2021. Just want to give you some quick numbers of the complaints we received in 2021. So just under 4,000 complaints. That's up about 6.5% from the year prior. And this is the breakdown of where these complaints actually came from. So there's our Consumer Services Division. That's where the majority of complaints end up or stay. So just under 3,000, then a little under 1,000 went to our Legal Division, and then 69 of those were in our Identity Theft Unit. We were able to get over $1 million in refunds through our complaint process. So that's up 21% from the year prior. Really happy about that. And this is the money breakdown. So the majority of that comes from our Consumer Services Division, Legal just behind, and then 4,500 for the Identity Theft Unit. I will say it's very difficult to recover money in an identity theft unit situation. On average, it takes about 41 days to resolve a complaint. That's down almost 20% from the year prior. Really happy about that number. And this is the breakdown of between the divisions. Services is 28 days. Legal usually takes longer because they're going through laws and things like that, 73 days. And then Identity Theft Unit, 74. So I showed you there's Consumer Services and Legal. What's the difference here? So why are we separating them out? All complaints start in the Consumer Services Division for SCDCA when they come in, whether you do that through a paper complaint or an online complaint. If it's an industry we don't regulate or have regulatory authority over, it stays in the Consumer Services Division to go through our voluntary mediation process. What is voluntary mediation? It's when people hear mediation, they think of divorce. Usually, it's not like that. You're not going to meet in person, and there's not going to be two attorneys going back and forth. Voluntary mediation is basically we just take your complaint, we send it to the business, and the business looks at it. We're going to be going through all of that in just a second. If the complaint involves an industry that we have regulatory authority over, or there's a situation that may violate the Consumer Protection Code, shows potentially unfair practices happening in the consumer marketplace, it will go to the legal department or division for more analysis. There are times where it goes to legal and they look at it and say, no, this isn't necessarily legal, but it may stay there just so they can finish out the complaint. It will go to legal for analysis there. Now, the Consumer Protection Code, just want to mention this for a second. It's mostly credit related. You can actually find the Consumer Protection Code information on our website if you want to learn more about what that covers. People hear Consumer Protection Code and they think it just applies to everything. If you read the actual code, it's mostly covering credit related items, which is why the majority of the industries that we regulate are credit related, because we enforce that code. And when it comes to our complaint categories in 2021, 84% of those fall in the closed satisfied. and then 15% are in the closed unsatisfied department. So just want to show you those numbers. We feel good because the closed unsatisfieds came down and the closed satisfieds came up a little bit. Here are the top 3 complaint categories in 2021. We're not shocked about vehicles being number 1. We know that vehicles have been the number 1 complaint for at least 5 years now for the department. Real estate was a close second at 597, and then contractors were at 331. And that vehicle complaint category is actually up 12% from the year prior. Real estate is up 17%, and then contractors are also up 15%. So the complaints are just going up. And vehicles, I know it's at least 5 years, but it could be more than that it stayed at the number 1 category. So how are you going to file a complaint if you have one? Here are the basics of it. You can either file online, which we will encourage you to do, over submitting a printed copy and mailing it in. I'm going to exit out currently to show you our website. So this is our website. You're not going to see this bar at the top because you can't edit our website. But if you're coming here to consumer.sc.gov, you'll just click on this How Do I, and you'll click on the File a Complaint. Again, we always suggest you file online because you can do everything there. You can upload all of your documents, any supporting documentation you may have, and the whole thing will take place there and through your email. So you don't have to be waiting for something to come in the mail. Mail can get lost, things like that. So we always suggest filing a complaint here. And you can see one of these is searching complaints. So that's our complaint portal that you can go to. And then we have HOA complaints. We'll talk briefly about that at the end here. And then filing a general complaint. So there's 2 ways to file your complaint. You'll read through this, and it tells you all the steps here of how to do that. Let me go back. So yes, we always encourage you to file your complaint online. You'll get a username and a password, and everything will be there for you. You don't have to go around searching for different things and printing out documents. HOA complaints. So there is a little bit of a different process here. So there were changes to state law in 2018 that now require SCDCA to collect certain data from consumers who are filing HOA-specific complaints. We've always taken HOA complaints since 1975 when we were created, but back in 2018 we started to collect specific HOA data. And this information is specifically collected and reported on annually to the governor, General Assembly, and the public. So you have to complete this supplemental questionnaire along with all of the other complaint information you need to fill out. If you don't fill out the supplemental questionnaire, you can't submit your complaint. We can't process it. So know that if you do have an HOA complaint, which it seems like a lot of people do, you have to fill out the supplemental questionnaire. And I'll show you the website again. So this is filing a general complaint. You'll have to fill out all of the information for a regular complaint, but you also will have to fill out this HOA questionnaire, which is a link right here. You'll open it up, and all of this information is specific to HOAs, right? This is the information we're gathering and we are submitting to the General Assembly governor every single year. Again, if you don't submit this, we cannot process your HOA complaint. So just know that before going into it. Let's get back to the PowerPoint. So what makes an effective complaint? So what is going to give you your best chance of getting a good outcome? So you want to have as many supporting documents as possible. As many key details, if there's been any correspondence back and forth between you and the business already, then that is what you should be submitting in your complaint. As much information as possible is the best thing. If you've done things to try and resolve this on your own, let us know what those things are. I mentioned the correspondence back and forth between a business. Make sure that you're including that too into your complaint. And then what you think would be a fair resolution. So if you are submitting a complaint and we don't have regulatory authority over it, we can't force that business to do anything. So keep that in mind. We want the resolution to be fair, and businesses are more willing to work with consumers who are, thoughtful and have a fair resolution for both the business and the consumer. So starting the complaint process, this is the way it goes. We're going to go through a little flow chart here of how it happens. So 1, the complaint is filed. Once that complaint is filed, we will start working, or our consumer services division will start working on getting that complaint processed within 2 business days. The business is given 20 business days or 4 weeks from the complaint mail date to respond. Now, if this was all done online and the business is doing this online, it may be faster just because we're not mailing things back and forth. The first follow-up letter is sent if no response is received within the first 20 days. And then they get an additional 20 business days to respond, so an additional 2 weeks. And then that second follow-up letter is sent after that expiration, and they provide an additional 5 days after that point. So we are here now where the business has been given 3 opportunities, basically, that initial, and then the first follow-up, and the second follow-up. Oh, somebody asked a question, just to clarify this, is HOA a homeowners association? Yes, I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. An HOA is a homeowners association. I'm just so used to saying HOA at this point, so I apologize for not clarifying there. So when it comes to the business response, so say the business is notified that we'll close the complaint as unsatisfied if there's no response after the second follow-up time period expires. That's where we are now. They've been notified 3 times of this complaint, and they're notified, hey, if you don't respond, it's going to be closed unsatisfied, and that's how we're going to close it on our complaint portal. If no response is received, the complaint will generally be closed within approximately 45 calendar days from the date it was sent to us or sent to the business, and the consumer's notified that it's been closed as unsatisfied because there was no business response. At any point that a business response is received, it will be reviewed by us. So if SCDCA, we need additional information or we have more questions, we'll reach back out to the business and ask those things for clarification prior or before to reaching out to the consumer who has the complaint. And then the consumer will be notified of the business response then. So what are the closing categories? I mentioned it's not just satisfied and unsatisfied. Well, there's a number of categories here. Number 1, the one we want to see the most is satisfied, consumer satisfied. What this means is that the business has responded and gave the consumer their satisfactory end. They gave the consumer what they were looking for. And then there is satisfied, adequate business response. So that means the business did respond, but it doesn't necessarily satisfy the wishes of the consumer. But the business responded to all points of contention in the complaint and referred to either a policy or something that they have that would explain as to why the consumer isn't getting what they want and supports that claim. Unsatisfied, a business response was never received after a complaint and reminder letters were sent out. So that's when an unsatisfied is going to be put on our complaint portal. It's just when a business doesn't respond. Referred is when we refer to other state agencies or other places. So is referred to an outside agency, and that includes other government agencies. Information, so the complaint simply notified SCDCA of something occurring. Wasn't necessarily a true complaint, but it's on there for information purposes. Duplicate, it kind of explains itself. It means that the complaint was already filed by the consumer, and the complaint is simply an update to a previously existing complaint. Insufficient merit, the complaint is not a true substantive complaint. So there is something that we find or the business provides that says the nature of the complaint can't be determined and that it's not necessarily true. Abandoned, it means that the consumer initially filed the complaint, but doesn't continue with it. So they fail to provide us with requested information necessary to proceed with the process. They just they ghost us. And then undetermined. This complaint is usually typically received a response from a business, and SCDCA thinks that there's some disputed facts here. And so it's really undetermined about the closing status between the business and the consumer. The complaints that we don't handle is business versus business. So if you own a business and you got a complaint about another business, you can't file a complaint with us. Between individuals, if you have a beef with somebody in your neighborhood and you just really don't like them, unfortunately, we can't handle that complaint either. We just can't handle consumer versus consumer complaints. Employer-employee disputes, we can't handle those because usually there's a process within your company, especially if you're a state or federal agency employee, that would handle those types of disputes. Complaints against government agencies at a local, state, or federal level. This includes the USPS, U.S. Postal Service. We just can't take complaints against other agencies because we are a state agency. Complaints about discrimination. Complaints about discrimination will most likely be referred out. So we wouldn't take those. I know, and Mandy, I know you're on here. We'll talk about our top referrals in a minute, but I think human affairs and also this minority affairs also take discrimination. If you have that answer, Mandy, let me know. Mandy's our director of our consumer services division. Human affairs, yes, okay. So human affairs often deals with complaints against discrimination. It's not that we just don't take complaints because we don't want to, it's because we're just not the agency that handles those. And if you're represented by an attorney, if you already have legal representation, then we most likely aren't going to be able to help you in the process. So since our process is a voluntary mediation, and you've already hired an attorney, that attorney is going to be able to do way more than we would. And if you've already had that legal action started. So again, that legal action is going to be able to do a lot more than we would through voluntary mediation. So we don't handle those type of complaints. Our top referrals, so we lovingly refer is BOFI, the Board of Financial Institutions Consumer Finance Division. So that's specifically going to be mortgage lenders and servicers, payday lenders, and check cashers. And then LLR, the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, contractors, funeral homes, real estate brokers, and more. Department of Insurance, obviously insurance companies, but storage facilities, bondsmen, and more. DHEC, so healthcare facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, retail food establishments, tanning facilities, things like that. Secretary of State, so if you have a complaint against, for business filings or charities and notaries. And then Human Affairs Commission is discrimination. That includes housing and employment. And the complaint disclaimer here is if your complaint contains any profanity or vulgar language, we're not going to process it. If your complaint is just full of vulgarity, we're not gonna process that. So know that going in. Anonymously filed complaints cannot be submitted through our complaint process either. So we need to be able to reach back out to you and speak with you. Your complaint can't be removed from the online complaint system once it's been submitted. So know that. Now, none of your personal identifying information is going to be on the online complaint system or even in the complaint portal. You're going to be searching complaints. No consumer private identifying information will be on there if that's the concern. An exact copy of your complaint and supporting documents will be sent to the business. So no, we are going to give what you give us to the business. Know that going forward. And the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, or some people call it FOIA, may require us to release documents you submit through the complaint. So say somebody requests to see a specific complaint against a business, they can do that through FOIA. But no, we don't release consumer private identifying information, or any information like payment information, account information, financial information. So know that we're not releasing that type of information. But please, please, please don't put social security numbers or account numbers or death certificates in your complaints. Please don't, because it's just, we don't need your social security number in order to process your complaint. We don't need those really sensitive private identifiers to handle your complaint. So it's probably best to just leave those out if you can. HOAs. So I know this is a hot topic, and there have been a number of questions that have come in. Don't worry, we're going to have a question and answer period just in a second. So I will get to you. HOAs are a very hot topic. We do have more HOA information. So we don't have regulatory authority over HOAs, but we take complaints against HOAs and we provide some basic education. If you're looking for more information, specifically either about the complaint process or the types of complaints we get, or the laws associated with homeowners association or HOAs, we have 2 webinars that are relatively new. We did these at the beginning of the year for our National Consumer Protection Week. There's one that's on the complaint report for last year, and then the HOAs and the law, which was the most popular webinar that we have almost every single year, is where we go over the laws that actually apply to HOAs. And you see this link down here? This is where all of this is housed. You can find it. These are on our YouTube channel. You don't have to sign up for anything to watch these if you want to. Now, the HOAs and the law presentation is long. It's over an hour long, but it's got a lot of really great situational things in there that might be helpful for you to know if you have questions. I'm the contact person on the HOA education page, and so I get a lot of phone calls about HOAs. So when it comes to your specific situation, we are most likely not going to be able to answer specific questions about your HOA when it comes to these things. But Carrie Gruby-Leibarker, she's our administrator and she's an attorney. She gave both of these presentations, and she provided some really good situations in here that may apply to something that you're experiencing. So I think they're really helpful. Again, I have it up here. So here are the 2 webinars. You just go to our YouTube page, it's SCDCA TV. And if you're looking for that HOA education page, you can just type in HOA education up here if you don't have the direct link. And it's this one right here. This is where you're going to find links to the YouTube, the webinars, but also links to our law outlines. You can download, all of this is free. So you can go here and you can look through all of this. Again, I know HOAs are a very hot topic, so I just wanted to cover that for a second. And the ways that we use complaint data, so complaints are used or shared directly with the appropriate business, obviously, because we're going through that voluntary mediation. Complaints are available on our public search site. So I wanted to show that to you real quick. So say you wanted to look through the complaints. You're doing your due diligence on a business, want to see if there's any complaints against them. You'll go to background of business. If they're licensed with us, you can do the licensee lookup. But search complaints is probably where you want to go. And then you type in Bailey Parker, because if I had a business with my name, that's what you'd put in. You don't have to put in the specific name if you don't know exactly what it is. You can just put in one word. but you'll just search that. If you know a specific address, you can put it in there and search it. Luckily, no one has filed a business complaint against Bailey Parker, but that's how you would do that there. And then we analyze this complaint data to help us really find out if there's any illegal business practices happening. And when it goes over to legal, that's what they're doing. They're going through these legal complaints and seeing, okay, do we have any enforcement authority here through the consumer protection laws, and identify if there's any trends that may be happening. I'll give you some examples of some regulatory actions we have had and settlements. And then we share that complaint data through the Federal Trade Commission's Consumer Sentinel database. So here are the frequently asked questions. How many employees are handling complaints? I mentioned at the beginning, we're one of the smaller state agencies. We have 43 full-time employees, but there's less than 6 people who are handling official complaints. It doesn't include the thousands of phone calls that we're getting. I got some updated numbers from our Consumer Services Director, Mandy. And this calendar year alone, so from January 1 of this year to now, the department has fielded over 14,000 phone calls, and the majority of those go to the Consumer Services Division. Less than 6 people handling all of those items. Why do you regulate only certain businesses? That's a really good question. Why don't we regulate all businesses? That's just the way that South Carolina is set up. And how the legislature and the government has been set up. So I mentioned those referral agencies. They would take complaints against those type of things, and then we take the general complaints that don't fall under like regulatory authority. So we do regulate some specific businesses. They're usually credit related. So if you want to find out the businesses that we actually license, you can go to our licensing page. And here are the businesses and industries that are regulated by us. So athlete agents, continuing care, retirement communities, credit counselors, discount medical plan organizers, mortgage brokers, motor clubs, pawn brokers. I'm not going to read them all, but they're usually credit related. So those are the industries that we are regulating. And so this is the #1 question I get. Why should I file a complaint if SCDCA can't force a business to do what I want? I think that's a valid question. If you know that you might not get the response you want from a business, what's the point of even filing a complaint? The reason I say to consumers, it's still worth your while, is you may get the response that you want, or you may come to some sort of compromise with the business. You saw that the majority of our complaints were closed satisfied, and a lot of those are consumer satisfied, but also business satisfied. So you may find some sort of compromise with that business and end up satisfied in the end. Of course, there are times where the businesses just don't respond. So yes, you could not get what you want. But I also tell consumers, if you do want to take additional action down the road, it may be helpful to have a complaint filed with Consumer Affairs if you want to hire an attorney down the road. Good to have that documentation. So, and it's free. So it's not like you're losing anything but your time, especially if you're filing online. Everything's right there in that portal. So yes, we may not be able to force a business to do what you want, or even an HOA to do what you want, but I still think there's merit and worth in the complaint process. And what happens when you get a complaint against a business that you do regulate? That's usually the follow-up question. Well, what do you even do when it is a business that you regulate? Really great question. So I've given 2 answers here. So here are some regulatory examples. In July of 2015, SCDCA worked with the South Carolina Board of Financial Institutions Consumer Finance Division, and we were investigating lending activity against this company, Cash Call Inc., or they would operate under Western Sky Financial LLC, or even WS Funding LLC. So we just kind of called them Cash Call and Western Sky. And we settled because what they were doing is they were actually lending illegally. They were acting as a Native American company or underneath that idea, and trying to follow the laws that apply, or lending laws that apply to tribes, and they were not. So after this investigation, the state and Cash Call, so us and Cash Call Western Sky entered into a voluntary settlement in 2016. What that actually resulted in was they were required to pay $500,000 to us to give out for consumer restitution. And then they were required to forgive all outstanding loans worth over $9 million. Then within 30 days of this settlement agreement, they were also required to remove all credit history of loans. So call the credit reporting agencies and let them know to take them off of people's credit reports so they could restore the credit of affected South Carolina consumers. This next one is just last year. So in February of 2021, we actually settled on this case against Candy Kern and Howard Sutter III and their affiliated company, Upstate Law Group, LLC. They were basing out of Greenville. And we worked with the CFPB, the federal agency, and the Arkansas Attorney General. We had been working on this since 2019. Basically, what these individuals did was they were duping consumers into illegal high-interest loans and targeting military pensions, which is specifically illegal in South Carolina, and separating military and other consumers from their hard-earned pensions. So when we settled with them in February of 2021, they were required to pay $725,000 in consumer refunds, but it also banned Candy Kern, Fuller, Sutter, and ULG from brokering or offering pension loans in the future, collecting any money related to any pension loans, and offering any financial services in South Carolina unless acting under the law. So these are some examples in the last, 7 years and the majority of these actions came from consumer complaints. We saw consumer complaints, it went over to the legal division, and then all of a sudden more complaints started coming in, and then we realized it was an issue. That's another thing I always tell consumers, you file complaints because you never know what could come of it. And it's because of consumer complaints and tips that situations like this happen. Okay, so that's the majority of our presentation. We got a lot of questions, so I'm going to open up my questions box. Mandy has a couple of things for me to say. Thank you, Mandy. So when you're providing documents through the complaint system, it only allows one document and there is a size limitation. Okay, good to know. I did not know that. If your document is large, you are going to get an error message. Mandy, can you answer this for me? Can you combine, if you have multiple documents, can you combine them into like a combined PDF? Obviously, if it's big, probably would error out. But let me know if people combine documents and then probably make them save them as a smaller document. Let me know if that's possible. Okay, she said yes. So yeah, if there's only one document they can upload, but you can combine multiple if you have them. Okay, this is a great question. So this is about credit repair company. This consumer is wondering if you were to file a complaint against a credit repair company that's based in Miami, Florida, does it have to be through that state's consumer affair process team? That's a really great question. So we're not only dealing with businesses who are just physically located in South Carolina. That for sure is you can file a complaint against them. But you also can file a complaint against a business that's doing business in South Carolina. So if this specific credit repair company is selling services to South Carolinians specifically, you can file a complaint against them. It doesn't matter where their headquarters is. Hopefully that answers your question. Do you have statistics for each of the closing categories? I'm sure we do. That's a good question. I don't have them currently, but that's something that if you're interested in getting from us, we can totally pull those. So just email me if you're interested in seeing the statistics for each of the closing categories. Okay, so Mandy also wanted me to say, when you're filing a complaint, they do need account information to provide it for the business, but it can be a partial number or just enough information for the business to locate you. Okay, so like an account number associated with the business. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't need to like enter in your bank account information or like credit card numbers. So yeah, yes, if you have an account associated with a business, you'll have to provide that information. So another question about the breakdown of closing categories. For it says, do you have a breakdown, for example, of the 600 plus auto complaints? How were they closed? I don't have those right now. It's a really great question, but if you're interested in receiving that type of breakdown, we can totally get that for you. Just email me. I assume all businesses have to be licensed. Do all businesses have to be insured and bonded? So this is a tricky question. So not businesses, especially in South Carolina, when it comes to being licensed, only specific businesses have to be licensed through like state agencies. Now, if they're selling some sort of retail product, then they obviously have to be licensed to charge sales tax. So they'd be licensed in that way. But if we're talking about a specific license for like a repairman, that's where the reason I mentioned that is because that's where it can get hairy, because there are certain types of what a consumer would say is a repairman that have to be licensed through LLR. But if they're only repairing small appliances, whatever those may be qualified, they don't have to be licensed. So it's a loaded question. So they don't necessarily all have to be licensed through a state agency is probably the better answer here. Do all businesses have to be insured and bonded? Not necessarily, no. And this is why it's so important for consumers to do research on the front end for themselves. We all wish that businesses would just be good businesses and do what they're supposed to and be honest. Unfortunately, I know from giving as many presentations as I have, that is not the case some of the time. So you need to do your research and make sure that if you are wanting somebody who's licensed, so say like a contractor, you want to make sure that their license is updated. You want to make sure when it was last updated. You want to get, if has there been any complaints? What are the status of the complaints? If you can get referrals from other people that you trust, and are they insured? Are they bonded? If all of those things matter to you, it is going to be on you as a consumer to do that research on the front end. And I know that's frustrating for some consumers to hear of, like, why can't we just trust businesses to do what they're supposed to do? If that was the case, there wouldn't be need for regulation, right? There wouldn't be need for us to do investigations into companies, because everybody would just be nice and do what they were supposed to do. So yeah, that would fall on you to do the research to find out, all of the updated information and if they're insured and bonded. Last question that just came in. I know we're 2 minutes over our amount, so if you need to leave, you can, but I'll just answer this last one. Lots of landscaping businesses, I'm assuming, like, popped up during the pandemic. Are they regulated? So regulated is again a loaded term. So for landscaping businesses, it depends on what counties that they're operating, cities that they're operating in. So if a landscaping company is operating in Lexington County and Richland County, those counties may have different business licenses or may not even have a business license that the landscaping company would have to use. So yeah, and they're not required to be licensed by the state specifically, so through LLR, but they may have licenses through the county that they're operating in, or even the city that they're operating in. I actually heard from a consumer that there are specific cities that are very diligent about checking licenses through the city about a landscaping company, or landscaping companies that operate within those city limits. But again, that depends on city and county levels, but they're not required to be licensed through the state or labor licensing and regulation, LLR. Seems like we're done on the question side. Thank you so much for attending today. Hopefully you learned something. So thank you so much, and we hope to see you next week and on further Wednesday webinars.